Hello everyone and welcome back to the prestigious Corus tournament of 2010. We already mentioned in the previous video that Magnus Carlsen won the event with in sole first place, but now it's time to see how it actually happened. And we're going to check out some of the games from this tournament. They are very nice ones, and I've made a short introduction into the tournament in the previous video. I've said that it was the first month that Magnus was ever rated number one in the world with a rating of 2810. Topala was 28.5 on this rating list. And here in round 3, after defeating Jan Smits in round 2, he faces Dutch Grandmaster Loek van Wely, who is regular on this event. He competed in, well, not just the course, he competed in Huguain, in Wijk in Corus and in Tata Steel, regardless of what the tournament was called, because he competed 25 times in the event, and he's an eight-time Dutch champion, so incredibly strong player. I mean, you can't ask for a tougher opponent. He was in 2001. He was also rated in world number 10. As his rating was 2714. So, well, just incredibly solid player. But it is Magnus Carlsen we are talking about. He was rated over 2800. So let's see how he takes on Loek van Wely here. So Loek, with the white pieces, opens with knight to f3. He goes for the ready opening. We have knight to f6 by Magnus, and now pawn to c4. We have pawn to e6 and knight to c3. We have pawn to d5 and pawn to d4. We have knight b to d7, so transposing into the queen's gambit declined. C captures on d5, e captures, and bishop to g5. We have bishop to e7, e3, and c6. So nothing new here, all been played before, and it has also been played in this tournament because Loek van Wely already played this in round 1 against Nigel Short, but we're gonna get to that. We have queen to c2, castles, and now bishop to d3. We have rook to e8 and pawn to h3. And Loek already had this position in round 1 against Nigel Short, and he defeated Nigel. And Nigel continued with the most standard idea, knight to f8, and it is the most played move in this position even nowadays. But Magnus decided to go for a very interesting pawn sacrifice, and he played knight to e4. Again, even in those days, it was not a new move. It has been played before. And interestingly, Loek van Wely already encountered this move in 1997 in the candidates tournament in Groningen against Jeroen Piquet. And that game ended in a draw. But we're going to get to that. We have bishop captures on e4. He continues in the same fashion as he continued in the candidates tournament in 1997. D captures on e4. We have knight captures. And now it looks a bit weird, but there is queen to a5 check. And now the problem is if you block with either knight, then you just lose the bishop on g5. You need the two knights here to defend the bishop. Also, if you play something like queen to c3 to block with the queen, then bishop to b4 just picks up the queen. What you could do is move the king to f1 or play knight back to c3. Now, knight back to c3... sorry, not knight back to c3. You could play queen to d2. Now bishop to b4 can be actually met with knight to c3, as the bishop is now only attacked once. But after knight to b6, it does look like maybe you're giving black a little bit too much. For example, castles, knight to c4 attacks the queen and the b2 pawn. And if queen to c2, there's bishop to f5. Again, nicely the black queen defends the bishop. And if e4, bishop to g6, white could go back with bishop to d2, and it's a very nice position. However, after this queen to a5 check, Loek continues in the same fashion as he did in the candidates tournament of 1997. He plays king to f1, and now in that game, queen to f5 was played, but Magnus improves on that position because on queen to f5, Loek just captured the bishop on e7. Magnus plays bishop to f8, and it is now, as of move 13, that the position has never been reached again. So, okay, bishop goes back to f4, gaining control over the d6 square, and only now queen to f5, putting pressure on the knight here, so you have to defend it. You can't really move the knight as the queen on c2 would hang, so knight f to d2 defending the knight, and now Magnus goes knight to b6, and here rook to c1. You could also go for the queen with something like g4, and once the queen moves, you play f3 to add another defender to the knight, but rook to c1 also works. Now the knight can move as the queen on c2 is nicely defended. Knight to d5 by Magnus, attacking the bishop. g4 attacks the queen, queen to g6, and now knight to d6, offering some trades. as well, you can't really decline them. The queen is under attack, and also the rook on e8 is under attack. So Magnus plays rook to d8. He just puts pressure on the knight and says, all right, let's trade queens. And okay, Loek trades queens, so we have queen captures, h captures, knight captures on c8, taking the bishop, knight captures on f4 first, and now e captures on f4. And here you think that, okay, Magnus will just recapture the knight, but no, he plays rook captures on d4 first, and now the knight on d2 is hanging as well. So Loek plays knight to b3 to attack the rook, and now what do you play here? This is the real question. Do you just capture the pawn on f4, or is there maybe a better way to keep the initiative going? And that is the difference between me or you, or a 2800 Magnus. He plays rook to b4. And rook to b4, to understand rook to b4, we first have to see what happens if rook captures on f4. If rook captures on f4, the idea was knight captures on a7, because you're going to lose that knight. The bishop stops the knight from going anywhere. And now after rook captures, attacking the a2 pawn, you will simply play pawn to a3. So what Magnus did, instead of capturing on f4, he plays rook to b3, and this prevents the knight from capturing on a7. Because if you captured on a7 now, and rook captures, now the pawn is hanging, and you cannot play a3 because the knight on b3 would hang. And if you play rook to a1, then rook captures on b3, and you're just dead here. You cannot recapture. Rook captures on a1 with check, and even if you trade everything, Magnus would still be up a full bishop and in a completely winning endgame. So king to g2 was played, and only now rook captures on c8. You could advance the pawn to f5, but it doesn't really do all that much. You're still going to lose that pawn at some point. So here, rook h to d1 was played, activating the other rook as well, preparing to go rook to d7, and now rook captures on f4. So better to go for activity. That's Loek's idea. Rook to d7. Now rook back to b4, defending the b7 pawn and stopping a3 as the knight would hang. Plus, you also want to get the bishop to f6 to put pressure on b2, and then maybe start advancing those queenside pawns. Rook to c2, adding a defender, so now the knight can actually move. Rook to e8. You need it to cover the e7 square if you want to get your bishop over to f6, but also if you want to play something like rook to e1 or rook to e2 if the white rook moves from c2. So okay, rook c to d2, and now bishop to e7. And here we have rook to c7. Waiting for black to make a move here. We have bishop to f6. Also, if you go for bishop to g5, rook to c7 made room for the other rook. So that's kind of the idea. But even after bishop to f6, rook d to d7, just going after the f7 pawn. Now Magnus goes pawn to b6, and while you could capture on f7, you can always capture on f7. So Loek first captures on a7, not allowing the pawn storm to commence. Pawn to g5, now stopping f4 and h4, and here Loek has to make a decision. Does he capture on f7? But even if he does, Magnus will start c5, c4, then capture on b2, and there's no way for the two rooks to actually do anything about this setup that Magnus has here, with the dark square bishop guarding the g7 pawn. So Loek instead goes back. He plays rook to d2, and now c5. We have rook to a6 and pawn to c4, chasing away the knight, knight to d4, and just bishop captures on d4. We have rook captures and rook captures on b2. So Magnus has created a passed pawn, and the problem is there's no way for you to actually capture the c4 pawn. And there was a lot of talk about this at this position and the possibility of rook capturing the c4 pawn back in 2010, and they even said that Loek had excellent drawing chances had he captured the c4 pawn, but I'm just going to show you that it doesn't work and what would happen. So if you capture on c4, then of course rook e to e2, going after the f2 pawn, and you cannot defend as the f4 square is covered. But king to g3, a rook captures on f2, and now the idea was sort of rook captures on b6, where if the rook captures, you capture on f2, and it's a draw. But there's this in between, not in between, there's the whole other branch of moves. Rook captures on a2, and now Magnus is up only one pawn, but the tricky position of the white king will allow Magnus to win this game. To give you an example, rook to c8 check, king h7, and rook b to b8, going after the h8 square. Now comes rook g2 check, king f3, rook a to f2 check, king e3, and now rook to f6. So you can hide the king on g6 and stop any checks coming your way. way. And if rook to e check, let's say king to g6, you will play rook b to c8. Now you're really out of moves here. You have to wait for black to make a move. The h3 pawn will fall as well. Rook to g3 check, king to e2. Now rook to a6, and after king to f2, going after the rook, rook a to a3. Now you attack the h3 pawn, and after h4, or you give a check, doesn't matter, then f6 can be played. You play h4, g captures on h4, and after rook captures on h4, there's rook a to f3 check, king e2, and now rook to f4. You go after the pawn. And now, okay, a check can be given. You can even play g5, and after rook to h7, going after the pawn, you will play g6. The f7 pawn is defended, and after rook to c7, just rook g to f3, and that's it. The pawn is guarded. Next move, you're going to capture on g4, and that's it. There's nothing white can do. You're just up 2 pawns, and now you have a completely winning endgame. So there was some talk about the possibility of a draw here, but not really. So here rook to d7 was played, and now comes pawn to c3 by Magnus. Now you don't play, and this was even a better move, but you don't go for rook e to e2 now, because you would be too slow. Here just rook to e8 with check, and after king to h7, rook captures on f7, and now after c3, rook a to a7 is enough for a draw, because rook captures on g7 comes with check. For example, c2, rook captures on g7, and after king h6, you have rook to h7 check, and now you'll just continue checking the black king wherever the black king goes, and it will be a draw. So Magnus cannot afford that. He plays pawn to c3, and now rook a to a7, going after the pawns now, and now rook to f8, just defending and ready to push the past c pawn. So rook d to c7 and pawn to c2. Magnus advances his pawn, and here Loek was still sort of in a position to play for a draw. But with his next move, that position has gone out the window. Here, with a move like a4, he can still play, because now after, let's say, rook to d8, rook captures on f7 and c1 queen, you can capture on g7, and it's still a draw. King to f8, and you're just going to give a rook a to f7 with check, and the king cannot cross the d file as the rook is on d8, so we'll just be able to continue checking the black king at the eternity, or until threefold repetition occurs. So after this c2 move, king to g3 was played, and now with this g3 move, it is no longer possible to hold this to a draw, but you have to find the correct move. I'm not going to ask you to pause the video, because it's the exact same move that was already shown in the previous variation. So rook to e8 can be played. Magnus played rook to d8, but it is also enough. And now, even if you wanted to admit your mistake and you played something like king back to g2, sort of hoping that it's a draw, now after king to h8, there is no draw. After rook captures on f7 and c1 queen, this does not come with check. You will capture here, but now queen to c6 check, a king hunt begins, and that's pretty much it. King g3, rook to d3 with check, f3, queen captures on f3 will be checkmate, or any other checkmate. So after rook to d8, rook captures on f7 was played, and now comes rook to d3 with check, king to g2, and now c1 queen. And it was in this position on move 40 that Loek van Wely resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So really strong game against Magnus, but Magnus found a way to, keep the game going, keep the game going. He found a nice sort of, not an improvement. The move that he played could even be considered suboptimal for the move that Short played in round 1 against Loek van Wely, but it allowed the game to go further into unknown waters, even breaching that point that Loek van Wely already had in the Candidates tournament of 1997. And again, Magnus was able to find poison. So yeah, even if you are the stronger player, you have to allow the game to continue forever, and you just have to allow your opponent, just give him more and more time to make a mistake. And if you are the stronger player, and if you can always, keep the balance, then you will win the games against very strong players, like our good friend young 2800 Magnus did here. So he resigned because of the same idea. After a check and king f8, rook a to f7 check, the rook moved from d8, so the king cannot the rooks cannot continue checking the black king once you give another check. King to d8, and there are no more checks. You can play rook f7 to guard f2 and prepare checkmate, but it is white king that will get checkmated. Queen to c6 check, king h2, queen to d6 with check, or any other check, doesn't really matter. Rook to b1 with check, you're going to play king to g2, queen to d5 check, finally f3, queen captures on h2 check, king g3, and rook to g1 will be checkmate, or any other checkmate. So yeah, for those of you who have missed the previous video, here are the standings of the tournament. Magnus, like I said, won in clear first place with 8.5 out of 13, but he did lose one game in this tournament, and I'm not going to tell you which one it is, as we are going to get to it and see who was able to stop the unstoppable young Magnus here. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you consider yourself to be the stronger player, don't just rush into simplifications. Make the game last forever, and in the end, you will be the last person standing. So I hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Kereka Stibor, Tom from Tipperary, John Anderson, Luke Donato, and John Tardif for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.